Good evening. And welcome to a calm, peaceful journey into one of America's quiet, lingering mysteries. Tonight, we'll drift slowly into the gentle folklore of the Phantom Hitchhikers of America, a soft, wandering thread woven through lonely highways, old country roads, and stories passed quietly from one traveler to another. As you settle in, let your body loosen, let your breathing grow slower, and allow the soft glow of history to guide your thoughts into a quiet, restful place. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to solve. Just listen to the gentle rhythm of the narration, and let the mystery unfold in its own slow, soothing way. So, when you're comfortable, we'll begin our peaceful bedtime story, The Phantom Hitchhikers of America. The beginning of this quiet journey drifts in softly, like a gentle breeze moving across an empty stretch of American highway at night. As you settle deeper into your pillow or your seat, imagine a calm, steady voice speaking just for you, slow, warm, close to the mic, guiding you into the first chapter of the story of America's Phantom Hitchhikers. This part focuses not on fear, but on atmosphere, on the quiet places where the legend first took root. The mystery hums softly beneath the surface, never sharp, never startling, just a faint shimmer in the background, like a distant light you can't fully place. The story begins in the early decades of the 20th century, when American roads stretched long and unbroken between small towns. Before interstate highways, before GPS, before neon signs lit the edges of every exit, the country was stitched together by narrow ribbons of pavement and gravel. These roads moved through open spaces, across farmlands, through pine forests, past old barns with fading paint, and alongside fields where the tall grass swayed like a slow-moving tide. Travelers who drove these routes always remembered the same peaceful sensations: the low hum of the engine beneath their feet, the rhythmic bump of tires on uneven pavement, and the cool night air drifting in from the window, carrying scents of fresh soil, dry hay, or the sharp clean smell of rain hanging somewhere high in the clouds. At night, the quiet became even deeper, almost velvety. The world outside the headlights didn't feel frightening, just calm, empty, and endless. These were the kinds of nights when stories began. Drivers would later say that during these long, solitary trips, their minds wandered easily. The road unfurled slowly before them, and time seemed to stretch out, unhurried, patient. In those quiet moments, some believed they saw the silhouette of a person standing by the roadside. A figure waiting. A traveler hoping for a ride. A presence that seemed oddly still in the silver wash of moonlight. Most early accounts were gentle observations, told in diners over steaming cups of coffee or mentioned casually at gas stations while someone cleaned dust from their windshield. A man driving home from a late shift might say he picked up a quiet young woman dressed in a slightly old-fashioned coat. A family heading back from a weekend visit might recall a polite traveler who climbed into the back seat and spoke only a few soft words before falling silent. And on rare occasions, someone would say that after a few miles, they turned to speak to their passenger, only to discover the seat empty, the door still locked, with no sign that anyone had stepped out. But these stories were not shared in frightened tones. Instead, people spoke with gentle puzzlement, as though they had brushed against something unusual and strangely peaceful. It was the sort of mystery that didn't raise your heartbeat, it simply made you wonder. Imagine those roads now, far removed from the noise and speed of modern highways. Picture the world as it once was, a long ribbon of pavement under a blanket of stars, surrounded by quiet fields and dark tree lines. The sky was wide and open, dotted with constellations that looked as though they had been placed there carefully, one by one. The only interruptions were the chirping of crickets, the whisper of wind moving through tall grass, and the steady glow of headlights cutting a soft path through the darkness. On nights like these, the line between the known and the mysterious felt faint, not threatening, just delicate. Travelers often said that the calm silence made them more aware of the world around them. More attentive to small details, a shift in the air, a flicker of movement near the edge of the road, or the gentle impression that the night held memories of those who traveled before. In many small American towns, the arrival of the automobile sparked a new era of movement. People began traveling farther, visiting state fairs, seeing relatives, seeking work, or exploring new corners of the country. Hitchhiking became a normal practice, and offering a ride to a stranger was seen as a simple act of kindness. It brought people together, farmers, laborers, soldiers returning home, students with suitcases made of cardboard and optimism, and in this culture of helping one another. A few unusual encounters slipped naturally into the flow of everyday life. Someone might pick up a traveler who seemed oddly quiet but polite. Another driver might notice that the person's clothes looked like they belonged to a slightly different decade, nothing alarming, just a little outdated. Folks rarely thought much of it. Until the stories began to repeat, a hitchhiker seen only on certain nights, a passenger who left no footprints behind, a rider who asked to be dropped at a destination that no longer existed, and the gentle, lingering sense that the encounter meant something, even if no one could explain what. These stories drifted from town to town, passed along in soft voices. They felt like small ripples on the surface of a still pond, barely disturbing the calm, but impossible to ignore. Over time, they settled into American folklore, just like old barns and abandoned motels do. They became quiet reminders of a country constantly on the move, filled with travelers whose paths briefly crossed in the stillness of night. If you drive through rural America today on an old highway, perhaps one of those two-lane stretches far from big cities, you might still feel something familiar in the atmosphere. The same cool air slips through the windows. The same stars hang overhead, steady and bright. The same hum of your car fills the quiet around you, and with it comes that soft, quiet echo of the past, the sense that the road has carried countless stories, some explained, some forgotten, and some lingering gently at the edge of memory. As this first part of our sleepy history journey comes to a calm close, let your mind rest in the atmosphere of those early American highways, their stillness, their simplicity, their slow and steady rhythm. Nothing urgent. Nothing alarming. Just the quiet companionship of the open road at night, stretching softly toward the horizon. The shift into this next part arrives softly. Almost like the quiet moment when a car turns onto a darker stretch of road and the world outside becomes just a little more mysterious. In this chapter, we drift deeper into the patterns that tie America's Phantom Hitchhiker stories together, gentle repetitions, familiar details, and echoes that appear across decades and thousands of miles. Nothing frightening. Only a calm sense of wonder, like noticing the same constellation rising in the same corner of the sky each night. The focus of this part is simple: how these stories began to resemble one another, even when told by people who had never met. The mystery remains soft and subtle. Just a faint shimmer that makes listeners lean in a little more closely. As you settle in again, imagine another quiet night on the American road. The highways of the mid-1900s carried a special kind of silence. Long stretches of pavement curved through farmland, desert, and forest, often without another pair of headlights for miles. When travelers drove through these darkened landscapes, they were wrapped in a cocoon of sound, the soft hum of the engine, the gentle tap of cooling metal, and the whisper of wind brushing past the windows. it was on nights like these that the patterns began to emerge. People from different states began describing the same type of encounter, a lone figure standing by the roadside. Usually on a calm, empty stretch of highway. The figure rarely waved, rarely shouted. Instead, they simply waited, still and patient, as though they knew someone would eventually stop. Drivers who pulled over always described the same small details. The hitchhiker would open the door with a quiet politeness. They would sit lightly, sometimes with folded hands, sometimes smoothing the fabric of their coat or dress. Their voice, when they spoke, was soft and calm. Many said the traveler seemed thoughtful, almost distant, as though their attention drifted somewhere far beyond the car window. The quiet conversation that followed often felt gentle and unhurried. A rider might ask where the driver was headed, or mention something about the weather, or speak the name of a hometown that didn't appear on modern maps. Their words never startled. If anything, they carried the warm simplicity of small talk shared between strangers who happened to cross paths for a short time. But then came the pattern that intrigued people the most. After a few miles, or sometimes after a turn in the road, the hitchhiker would fall silent. The driver, thinking nothing of it, kept moving forward through the night. And when they eventually glanced toward their passenger, often to offer a final bit of conversation, they discovered an empty seat. The door remained closed, the window untouched, the air inside the car strangely still. It was as if the traveler had simply faded away, like a breath dissolving in cold morning light. These accounts, gentle though they were, drew the attention of small-town newspapers and local storytellers. In places like Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Texas, folks noticed that the details repeated again and again. The old-fashioned clothing. The soft, polite voice. The sudden disappearance without any sign of a door opening. Each story seemed to mirror the next, despite being told miles apart, and yet, no one seemed frightened by them. Instead, the stories carried a tone of quiet curiosity, like encountering a peaceful stranger who simply belonged to another time. One older man, speaking to a community reporter in the 1950s, said he picked up a young woman wearing a coat with buttons he hadn't seen in years. She asked if he could take her as far as the town bridge. When they crossed it, he turned to tell her they were almost there. But the passenger seat was empty. The man told the story with a gentle laugh, adding that he wasn't scared, only puzzled. He wondered if perhaps she was a memory of someone who once walked that road long before cars became common. In rural Ohio, a group of teenagers returning from a school dance said they offered a ride to a man in a military-style jacket. He sat quietly, his gaze lowered, speaking only a few soft words. When they reached the next crossroads, he disappeared as quietly as he had arrived. The teenagers would later say, in calm voices, that the encounter felt peaceful, almost respectful, as if the rider simply needed to travel a little farther before stepping back into the world he belonged to. Stories like these connected people across states. Someone in California would describe the same subtle sensation that a traveler in Georgia experienced. Someone in New Mexico would tell a story nearly identical to one whispered in the mountains of Montana. The patterns became a kind of soft folklore, shared in diners, gas stations, campgrounds, and long-haul truck stops. People passed the tales the same way they shared directions or travel tips, with kindness. With a little wonder, and with the simple acknowledgement that the road holds more stories than any map could contain. What makes these accounts so soothing, even now, is not the mystery of the disappearing passenger. It's the atmosphere surrounding them. The late-night drive. The quiet road. The sense that time slows down as the car glides forward. The gentle company of a stranger who leaves no mark except a memory that settles softly into the traveler's thoughts. Some folklorists later suggested that phantom hitchhiker stories were tied to places where people once lived, loved, and traveled. Old routes that carried soldiers home from war. Roads leading toward former train stations or quiet bridges long since rebuilt. Paths people walked before cars were part of daily life. The idea was not that the hitchhikers were ghosts, but that they were echoes, soft impressions of people whose stories lingered along the roadways. Others believed the stories reflected something simpler, the loneliness of long-distance travel. The desire for companionship on the open road. The sense of connection that comes from offering a ride to someone who seems gentle and in need of a little kindness. Whatever their explanation, the tales continued because people found comfort in them. There was something reassuring about the idea that travelers still passed along familiar routes, even long after their time. Something peaceful in imagining that the road remembers. That it holds the footprints and voices of those who came before. Picture this for a moment, the slow beam of headlights stretching across a quiet rural highway, a figure standing by the shoulder, illuminated in pale white, a door opening with a soft click, a voice speaking gently in the cabin of the car, and then, without a sound, the seat becoming empty again, leaving a driver alone with a mystery that feels neither frightening nor urgent. Just quietly meaningful. These patterns, repeated over decades, give the legend of phantom hitchhikers its soothing rhythm. They remind us that history is not only found in books or museums, it lives in the places we cross every day. In the roads we take without thinking, and in the quiet stories that drift between small towns, carried in the calm voices of those who remember. As this second part comes to a gentle close, let your mind rest on the peaceful repetition of these encounters, the familiarity of them, the soft predictability, the way each story feels like a quiet echo of the last. There is one story, whispered more often than most, a story so gentle, so quietly unsettling, that it has lingered across decades like a fading perfume. It begins on a cool autumn night. Somewhere along a winding rural road just outside a small American town, drivers would describe the air as still, the sky as moonlit, and the world as unusually, peacefully quiet. And then they would see her, a young woman, standing alone at the edge of the road. She wore a simple white dress. Nothing ornate. Just soft fabric that seemed to glow faintly beneath the moonlight. Her hair appeared damp, as if she had been caught in a light rain, her face calm, pale, and unreadable. Every version of the story says the same thing. She didn't wave, she didn't speak, she simply stood there, as if she had been waiting for someone. The driver would slow down, roll the window down gently, and ask if she needed help. Her answer was always quiet, steady, polite. She would say she needed a ride home, nothing more, nothing less. She would step into the car with slow, graceful movements, hands folded neatly on her lap, never looking directly at the driver, only out the window. And for a few miles, nothing unusual happened. The world rolled by softly, the hum of the engine blending with the rhythm of the night. But then, just as they approached the destination she had given, a small house with a glowing porch light, the driver would glance toward her, and discover the back seat was empty. No door had opened, no sound was heard. She was simply gone. The porch light continued to glow, the night remained quiet, and only the faintest echo of her presence seemed to linger in the air. When the startled driver knocked on the door, a kind elderly couple would answer. They listened patiently, their expressions soft, almost sorrowful, and then in a voice worn by time. They would explain, their daughter had died many years ago, along that same road, wearing that same white dress, trying to make her way home, and every few years, in the quiet stillness of autumn, she tries again. Far from the quiet wooded roads of small towns, there lies a different kind of mystery, one shaped by open skies, warm winds, and miles of lonely desert highway. This story drifts along Route 66, the old mother road that once carried travelers across the heart of America. Out here, the landscape feels endless, a wide, open silence broken only by the soft hum of a car engine, and the gentle whistle of wind brushing across the sand. Many drivers have spoken softly of what they saw. A lone figure standing far ahead, barely visible in the shimmering heat. It was always the same man, tall, thin, wearing a dusty old coat that fluttered lightly in the desert breeze. His hat, wide-brimmed and sun-worn, cast a shadow across his face, and beside him, strangely out of place on a modern highway, stood an old canvas travel bag, the kind people carried long before suitcases had wheels. Those who stopped described the moment as oddly calm. The man would speak politely, in a soft voice that felt old-fashioned, as if borrowed from another era. He would ask for a ride just a little farther down the road. Nothing more. Inside the car, he barely spoke, choosing instead to look out at the desert as if he knew every mile by heart. Drivers often described a faint smell, not unpleasant, just unexpected, like old leather warmed by the sun. And then, just as they neared the small town he had mentioned, the temperature inside the car would shift, a light chill, not strong, just enough for the driver to glance over, and that was when they realized, the seat beside them was empty, the coat, the hat, the bag, all gone, only the faint, lingering scent of warm leather remained. Some drivers would continue nervously to the town, and after asking the locals, they would hear the same quiet explanation, yes. Years ago, a traveling salesman died on that stretch of Route 66, his car broke down in the heat of summer. He tried to walk into town, but he never made it, and every so often, on warm, quiet nights, when the desert winds are soft and the road is empty, he seems to still be trying. There is a gentle stillness that settles over old battlefields at night, a kind of hushed respect, as if the land itself remembers the footsteps of those who once passed over it. And along one such quiet road, bordering the rolling fields of an old Civil War site, travelers speak of a hitchhiker unlike any other. The road is peaceful today, lined with soft grass, tall oaks, and the distant shape of memorial stones. But when darkness folds over the landscape, a different presence is said to appear. Drivers describe seeing a solitary figure standing along the roadside, a young man dressed in what looks like an old military coat, faded with time, the fabric hanging loosely as though worn by years of wind and rain. He stands very still, not waving, not stepping toward the car, just waiting, with a quiet patience that feels almost gentle. Those who stopped often say they never felt fear. Instead, there was a strange calm, a sense that the young man meant no harm, and perhaps had simply been waiting a very long time. When he entered the car, he would nod politely, his voice soft, quieter than the hum of the engine. He would speak only a little, asking to be taken toward a small farmhouse not far down the road. There was a warmth to his words, as if he remembered the place fondly, and had every intention of going home. The air inside the vehicle always shifted then. Not cold, not unsettling, just different, as though the atmosphere grew older, steeped in memories that did not belong to the present moment. As the driver approached the farmhouse, the soldier would fall silent, gazing ahead with a longing that needed no explanation, and just as the car slowed, the seat beside them would be empty, no sound, no movement, no trace he had ever been there at all. local residents, when asked quietly, often share the same story in soft, measured voices, that a young soldier once lived in that old farmhouse, and never returned from the war. Some say he still tries to make his way home, choosing the kind drivers who pass through the stillness of the old battlefield road. They say he appears only when the night is gentle, when the moon is low, and when the world feels quiet enough for a memory to step back into the present, and whether or not the tale is true, the road remains serene, a place where the past lingers lightly on the air, and where some travelers claim they once carried a passenger, who had been waiting for more than a century. If you are still awake, take a slow, gentle breath, let the quiet of the night settle softly around you, feel the calm of the open road and the gentle echoes of travelers' past drift with you, allow your thoughts to slow, your body to relax, and drift peacefully into sleep. Good night.